reconciliations, which is responsible for issuing checks here in the in the state of Delaware, which we're obviously doing less and less of, as you can imagine, because it takes about $50 to process a check, and sometimes it's really funny to see a check issued for $2 and it costs $50 to make it. So obviously, we're moving to more electronic transactions in that manner. You can visit our website that will be relaunched. But let me talk really briefly about the subject that we're here, really access to capital, and really some of the findings that we had in this first report on the Delaware State Treasury. As you can see, I'm very fan of the parchment. That's because I love Alexander Hamilton. And so, in case you wonder why is this old-looking paper always up here, that's just kind of the theme that we go with. But really, what we wanted to do when I took office, really look at redefining the Treasury. I can say, unfortunately, that we did not have really any relationships with any minority-owned vendors prior to me taking office. And I've only been in office for 60 days. And that was very troublesome on so many different levels because, again, what we saw initially was, I hate to use this expression, but the good old boy network, right? An RFP would go out. It would not have the famous clauses that, Dr. Fred and others work on about supporting women and minority-owned businesses, but yet there would always be these executive orders and things that say, oh, well, we support the business. Well, how do you support the businesses if it's not going out in the RFP? And that was very troublesome. So that was one of the issues that we found, and then what we noticed in the awarding process is that people would go in the back room, and somehow magically it would always end up to be the same vendors getting the same contracts. And that was a major problem. That's something that we are working on, and I have policies that we are going to bust that door open. So the first few months of my administration, we've been targeted by the news. Chip Flowers has some radical ideas. He wants to take the money away from some of our favorite banks. And that's unfortunate reality that we live in, but we have to do those things. So what we've done is that the part of this program, we've talked about the Small Business Investment Program, and we've met more often with probably Steve and his predecessor's administration because you all are lucky to have a wonderful administration, and Steve Grossman and his predecessor, they did a wonderful job in really understanding the importance of capital, how you can leverage money to create jobs. And in Delaware, we are doing the same thing. We actually are modeling a lot of our program. We have an implicit competition with Steve to figure out how much money we can put out on the street. I think Steve's small business program is about $100 million, no more than $5 million per bank. I think we'll be $5 million and $1 per bank, and $101 million and $1 will be the size of the Delaware program. But this is very important because I bring this up for a couple reasons. One, in the Small Business Investment Program, what we're doing is we're taking the $1.5 billion and we will be putting about $150 million into local banks with a unique requirement, right? We're going to say, listen, not only must you be out there supporting small businesses, but you're going to report to us the number of minority-owned businesses that applied and how many businesses were successful. And I think the presentation that we heard earlier talked about the denial rates. We are very concerned about that because if you hold down a group of people, you can't grow your economy. It's just that simple. You can't say, well, we're only going to support these people over here. We're not going to support these people over here. That doesn't work anymore. And what we had an opportunity a few weeks ago, one of the state's largest financial institutions is was very short of going through bankruptcy. It was just bought out, and it's been in the paper. It's Wilmington Trust. And they sat down and they met with me, and they had a significant amount of state money. And the problem was I couldn't sleep at night because knowing that so many community-owned banks that were lending to minority institutions couldn't get money from the state treasurer's office, but yet this bank was getting about $300 million. And they were about to go under. And there was political pressure for me to keep the money in the bank, to keep things going. And I said, why are we doing this? So where Steve was able to create his program, and Steve and I pretty much the same power to invest money, we had political pressure to keep money in the same institution, even though the bond ratings were falling and though there were other banks that were clearly out there doing more than the community. And that's not to slight our colleagues at Wilmington Trust, but it was saying that the focus is off, right? You have to have the political courage to basically go in and do those things. And what we're doing is that we're going to open up that door and say, no, no, no. We're going to take money away from institutions that basically aren't meeting our standards and only give money to institutions that are actually lending to everyone on a neutral basis. So we're very excited about this program, and I'm jealous of Steve because he was able to implement his program. I actually have to go and try to convince a whole bunch of people to actually put money in local banks. You would think that's kind of natural. You say, well, Can I take money from a bank in New York and put it in Delaware? I have to go talk and try to convince people, where you all are fortunate enough that you all can just do it. So we're going to be implementing our program probably in the next 30 days. But another special program, two other special programs I want to talk about, is our Economic Targeted Investment Program, which is something I'm very excited about, that we're meeting with a lot of investment banks. Is that one of the requirements that we're having is that this Economic Targeted Investment Program, we are asking banks to say, listen, we have communities that basically, minority-owned businesses that need capital. How can you take state money, package it in a way that's going to put money into minority areas that are going to create jobs and get our economy moving? And that's something that we think that many businesses can take a part of. And whether or not that you are an investment manager in Boston, Massachusetts, if you have a creative idea, we want to hear it in Delaware. This is not just about making sure that within our state that we support those businesses there. Yes, we're going to support Delaware businesses, but it's also about supporting those businesses that think outside of the box. And so what I've been doing is meeting with a variety of different banks over the course of the last two months, really making sure. Now, I'll give you a clue. If you come into my office without a diverse team, I'm going to be upset. And I've had on a number of occasions, I've had to call out certain banking institutions that love to bring down. They bring down teams of people. It's amazing how many banks will meet with you and they'll bring 20 people down. And I always enjoy, like, wow, 20 people. What do all these people do? Only one person talks. Have you noticed? Hi, Mr. Treasurer Flowers. I'd like to introduce you to our whole team. But only one person gets to talk, and the rest of them there just kind of flip the book with you. God, I love my job. So you walk into the room, and myself, my deputy will walk in, we'll sit, and there'll always be a long conference room table, and they'll give their presentation, and they'll always talk about, it'll always be like a bullet point on slide 15 that we are very diverse, but yet in the room there's no diversity. And so I always say, listen, don't put the bullet point on your slide. Like, if you want to show me that you are diverse, make the room diverse. And so as a requirement, I always like to make sure that it says, what are the members of your team? Do they have a diverse background? And I guess the word is getting out on the street now, because I've noticed the last few meetings, man, there's been more diversity in those rooms than any time before. So I enjoy. One guy had to pull her aside. Son, how long have you been on this account? Treasurer, I don't want to say anything, but I just got pulled in a couple days ago. So at the end of the meeting, I said, I want this guy to be my point person. Only he can talk to me. But I'm serious. You have to have that commitment. I'm joking, but this is the craziness that we see. And I was talking to Denise about this, that you have to have that commitment. You have to go to step beyond. It's not about just what's on your pitch book. It's about making sure that you're committed to the cause and doing the things that are really right to do. I've already gone over this, but I want to make sure I say this. Obviously $1.5 billion of state funds. We settled the position, but the opportunities that I think that you all can really experience with the Delaware State Treasurer are three. One is that the Small Business Investment Program, that we are looking for minority-owned financial institutions that really can do a wonderful job in managing our money. And that's going to be very important for us. If there are any minority-owned institutions that you all know and that you could believe could help the state manage money, we are open and we are all ears. I am not a fan of subcontracting work to minority vendors. I make no bones about it. I want to make sure that you can get in the front door like anyone else. So the whole notion of teaming and I think it's a wonderful idea to work with companies and brand, but at the same time, I meet with my minority-owned investment managers just like JP Morgan Chase, any other larger institution. You sit down, you pitch to me. If it makes sense, we'll give you business. Now, if you don't have the capacity to do $300 million of managing money, we can find a number that works for you. But when you come to the state treasurer's office and meet with me, have it together, because we are going to take you seriously. We're going to be very credible. And if you have a credible presentation and credible ideas, you'll be listened to. In our RFPs, we're making sure that every RFP issued has a minority-owned clause. I am not the governor. The treasurer, unfortunately, in Delaware in recent years has always been elected the governor. So everything we do, we're always looked at with that light. So I always make it very clear to use that pulpit to my advantage and say, well, the governor has done a wonderful job issuing executive orders, but it's got to be in the contract. I want those RFPs to make sure that they stay, that with, that we must have minority-owned contracts, and we're going to issue them to minority-owned businesses.